Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show, while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to, before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, we see that in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that the Democrat National Convention is already off to its shaky start. And, of course, last week we also know that the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around Bulgarian, Donald J. Trump, also known as John Barron and also known as John Miller, was officially selected as the nominee for the gutless opposition party, or GOP. Folks, I want to take a moment now to have a heart-to-heart conversation with you with respect to what we're seeing afflict the arena of American politics. The system of American polity has faced challenges in the past, but none ever quite so directed as this, at least not in the entire scope of living memory. Sure, the United States of America is no stranger to contentious election cycles. I know that I've oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that the election of 1800 was referred to as the Revolution of 1800. But what we see with Donald J. Trump and his willingness to just continue to attack Texas Senator Ted Cruz after the chips have fallen into place goes beyond the pale. It's something that we have not experienced in living memory. Some would say that this is proof positive that the mafioso quafioso is mentally unstable, or that he's unable to let go of his grudges. Those are certainly not characteristics that one would expect to find in one who seeks the highest office in the land. But I think we need to delve even deeper than that. I think we need to look at what could possibly be motivating the mafioso quafioso to continue to spread lies and disinformation about a true stalwart constitutional compositionist who has been doing everything in his power throughout his entire adult life to protect and defend the fundamental and inalienable God-given rights of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. Why would they attack that? Why is that viewed as a bad thing? And on top of that, why is it that rinse and repeaters can go out in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and proclaim that it's okay for the Democrat delegates to vote their conscience, but not so with respect to the GOP's delegates? It's this kind of double standard that my first officer, Jeremy Graventon, and I were discussing on yesterday evening's program. It's flabbergasting to think that the United States of America finds itself in such an untenable situation right now. And then, when you juxtapose this with respect to how many of the so-called conservative punditry and commensurate have essentially sold their souls for the mafioso quafioso, or 30 pieces of dandruff, it just lets you know exactly what the state of affairs are in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. Deceit, deception, and trickery have become the hallmarks of the 2016 presidential election cycle, and I wish that I had words of solace and comfort to provide you as I sit here and speak into this microphone. Unfortunately, I have no such words of comfort or solace. Because when we look at the current state of affairs in the United States of America, we see that deceit has become the exciting thing. People want to believe the lies that have been spread by the mafioso quafioso and his Trumplings. But the fact of the matter remains that the United States of America should be based on an open and honest system, which is based on the natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundation of not only our shared United States Constitution, but also the entire representative Republican form of government of ours. Now, if there's another thing that we have oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, it's that the United States Constitution is the longest contiguous or uninterrupted running constitutional document in the entire course of human events. That's such a huge thing to realize. It's something that is so important, yet given so little fanfare, that I think we need to delve into how the revisionist historians, along with their allies in the frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialist leftists, and also the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, have essentially pulled the political wool over the eyes of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in America, we the people. This has all been orchestrated in a way to not only divide the base of the gutless opposition party or GOP, but also to ensure that the radical agenda of the frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialists is allowed to progress uninterrupted. They don't want people to be able to think for themselves, because it's as Alexis de Tocqueville mentioned all those years ago, that the purpose of those who are supporting any form or flavor of socialism is just to bring about a type of caste system that we have not known in the Western world since the time of feudalism. In other words, what they are pushing is a medieval doctrine that has no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. Furthermore, it's not even something that we should accept as an integral part of a Republican form of government, because the United States Constitution itself tries to abolish any form of nobility. And of course, that's exactly what Donald Trump was trying to do when he was having people swear an oath of allegiance to him throughout the primary process. It's what the Democrats want to try and do. That's why we see Hillary Rodham Clinton trying to carve out a special niche in the law, essentially saying that she is above the law and that only peons have to abide by it. Well, when we look at the 14th Amendment, which provides a truly extra due process clause, which was originally contained in the Fifth Amendment, but this was added in the post-Civil War years to remind the states of the significance of that portion, but also the Equal Protection Clause, that means that the law is supposed to apply equally across the board to all American citizens, irrespective of any type of position or title they might hold. That just speaks to common sense, because the whole revolutionary aspect of what our founding fathers had devised when they created this country 235 years ago with the ratification of our shared United States Constitution was that we, the people, are the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. Now, I know that may sound abstract or disconnected with what it is that we're looking for, and it comes down to this, and that's what it really comes down to, and it is that we, the people, must be proactive in the maintenance and safeguarding of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Sounds easy enough on paper, but everything can sound easy on paper. It's another thing when you actually put it into practice, when you actually go out and put your convictions on full display. That's what Texas Senator Ted Cruz did on the last night of the Republican National Convention there in Cleveland, Ohio. He wasn't going to be bamboozled. He wasn't going to be forced or cajoled into supporting a candidate who went out of his way to attack his family, his father, his wife. It was all just too much. And any person who takes their honor seriously and believes that the United States of America must, by its very nature, be a virtuous republic supported by a virtuous sovereignty, then you cannot just willy-nilly go about trying to endorse someone who stands in staunch and stark opposition and is diametrically opposed to everything that you hold near and dear. Now, of course, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media want us to believe that what they are doing is showing that Ted Cruz is out of touch, that he's selfish, and that we are somehow in the minority. Folks, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, are here to tell you and to demonstrate clearly to you that nothing could be further from the truth. That is propaganda. It's an attempt to demoralize you and to make you give up hope and faith in the cause that we have worked so diligently towards for several successive generations now. And when you recall that the entire purpose of our representative Republican form of government is to safeguard and to ensure the free exercise of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights without fear of governmental repercussion for posterity, you then begin to fully realize exactly what it is that we are called upon to do in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. That's why the disingenuousness that's going forth with respect to these WikiLeaks documents, where they're trying to claim that Ted Cruz somehow had some connection with reaching directly out to the DNC for funding to help his Free the Delegate movement, is intellectually disingenuous. Irrespective of whether or not those emails were found by WikiLeaks on the DNC email server, that does not mean that it was directly handed to Ted Cruz, or rather from Ted Cruz to the DNC. There were also emails from Ken Cuccinelli, and that too doesn't prove anything. It only shows that the DNC has an ability to infiltrate. Remember, when we speak of the Fabian socialists, the entire impetus behind their political philosophy and ideology is that of infiltration. Think back to how we have oft-times reiterated that the original iconography of the Fabian society, which traces its origins back to 19th century Great Britain, was that of a wolf in sheep's clothing. That means that they have operatives everywhere, spies. It's basically political espionage within the country itself. That is, not dealing with foreign powers or entities, but focusing on the United States itself. When you frame it in that context, all of a sudden everything begins to make sense. All of the pieces begin to fall into place, and all of a sudden everything that these Lion Branch Trumpidians say are just more of the same. It's par for the course for those who have started implementing the rules for radicals doctrine first pinned down by that frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialist Saul Alinsky. That shows that what we are facing is a truly devious political movement that has hijacked the gutless opposition party, or GOP. They're attempting to have our way with, their way with us. And what that comes down to is they are essentially raping the base of the Republican Party. That's what makes the words that Donald Trump said when he went before the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and proclaimed that it's the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party, all the more dangerous. It shows that he does not want conservatives. Furthermore, he's going on this fluke of trying to reach out to disenfranchised Bernie Sanders voters. Remember, folks, that Bernie Sanders is a self-avowed socialist. He loathes and despises the natural law tenets that underpin our shared United States Constitution, as well as our very representative Republican form of government. And he's doing everything in his power to annihilate both it and the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. We bring this to your attention because it is of that significant importance. It is of the utmost importance that we remain committed to our principles and ideals that are, by their very nature, being based on the natural law, timeless. Their applicability apply just as much today as they did 235 years ago at the inception of the United States, as, God willing, they will 235 years from today. But again, that calls upon us in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty to remain committed, to be unshaken. We must be stalwart in our efforts to preserve and maintain not only our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, but also the fundamental and inalienable rights of our fellow sovereign, individual, popular sovereigns, the American citizen. That's what's so troubling with respect to people like Lush Bimbo or Rush Limbaugh when he sits there and he applauds the Donaldoff for going in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and lambasting Cruz. The problem that Trump has with what Cruz said on the convention floor on that last night of the RNC there in Cleveland, Ohio, was the fact that Cruz said to preserve the Constitution, to stay true to our conservative principles and values. I'm sorry, folks, but I don't see what the hell is the problem with that. And the fact that the mafioso quafioso is making such a big deal out of that, is throwing a temper tantrum or a trumper tantrum and having so many lamentations in front of the salivating mainstream media just goes to show that he's a plant. But that raises the significant and nagging question of whether he is a plant for the DNC, as my first officer Jeremy Grapington and I have suspected for quite some time, or whether it is part of a Russian connection. I think that that is probably an evolutionary step. I think it started off with him being a plant for the DNC, where they were not expecting the GOP to be willing to nominate such an off-the-hinges, off-the-rockers candidate as their official nominee, and were hoping for a third-party run, but when he saw that he could have all of this power, particularly considering that the highest office in the land, the chief executive office, has been completely expanded away from what it was constitutionally endowed to be within the confines of Article 2, we see that he became intoxicated with power, intoxicated with the potential amount of power he could wield over the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. Men like Trump are often referred to as narcissists. And clearly, he does have that type of personality. It's shown over and over again. His willingness and penchant for holding grudges, his inability to let go of the things that people say unless they are willing to demean themselves by bowing down at his feet, groveling there for his acceptance. None of that has any place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. And that's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have so oft-times said that what we're facing here is an intellectually disingenuous front to destroy conservatism and the values that we have cherished going back to the inception of our country some 235 years ago. Cannot support him. Because Donald Trump does not represent or reflect or adhere to any of those sacred principles. That is just the fact. And the longer that we think about this, and the longer that we have to deal with his consistent inconsistency, the greater danger that our republic faces. Now sure, we have people like Nate Silver going out there and pontificating in front of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media that somehow Trump would win if the election were to be held today. But you see, that's the problem with polls. I know that we have oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that polls are not all that accurate, and therefore we don't give them that much credence. But that's particularly the case when we are in such an untenable situation as we are right now here in this disastrous 2016 presidential election cycle. This is shaping up to be not only the most divisive and divided election cycle of living memory, but also to be one of the greatest disasters to ever be foisted upon the gutless opposition party in the past 100 years. We must keep that in mind. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to overcome the problems that we currently face. Of course, one of the things that I think makes it worse as we sit there and watch the socialist parade there in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is that we see just how much of a squandered opportunity we had. For the first time in a very long time, the gutless opposition party had the opportunity to embrace their constitutional values, to embrace the true originalist intent of a limited government. But no, the Lion Branch Trumpidians and those crossover Democrats that wrought habit in the open primaries throughout the primary process ensured that we would have this lingering disaster just unfurling before our very eyes. It's not easy to face that and to realize that. And no, this isn't complaining on my part. It's just an explanation as to the current state of mind that I hold as I watch not only the DNC, but the continuing implosion of the gutless opposition party. Trump is not unified. And that is something he's going to need, because the gutless opposition party always enters into a general election cycle at a great disadvantage, because the Democrats have their strong allies in the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. That was always a double standard, something that the once conservative punditry and commensurate had oft-times lamented about, but then decided that that was going to not be the case when they dealt with Texas Senator Ted Cruz. It's this sort of double standard that we have seen over and over again ad nauseum that just drives me up the wall, just as I am sure that it drives the vast majority of you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, up the wall as well. Because we see there is a disconnect between the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or as it's referred to in the common vernacular as the establishment wing of the Republican Party, has no desire to promote conservative values. Of course, we already knew that because they hadn't fulfilled any of the promises they made in the midterm elections of 2014. And I remember that one of the people that really switched over, one of the supposed kings of conservative talk radio, Rush Limbaugh, had lamented the fact that the Republican Party had become the party that stood for nothing. Never before had a party which stood for nothing been handed a mandate by the people and ignored it and dropped the ball. But here's the thing, folks. They're ignoring that mandate now. Do you honestly believe that the New York Bulgarian is going to do anything within his power to destroy Obamacare? Remember that during the primary process, he actually told Jake Tapper over there at CNN during a town hall meeting that the three primary impetuses and duties and obligations of the federal government was to provide education, housing, and health care. You will not find that anywhere within the confines of our shared United States Constitution, and the reason being is it is not in there unless you include Article Section Existent, Clause 0, which is right next to the Bovine Excrement Clause. I don't mean to be crass, folks, and I'm not even trying to insult people, but what we are seeing here is a move away from the lofty ideals that propelled the United States of America to such lofty heights in our relatively brief yet illustrious history, to shallow, hollow, and empty, as well as meaningless platitudes. We can ill afford that, particularly when you consider that the United States of America currently, as I sit here and speak into this microphone, is in the grips of not only an identity crisis, but a slew of constitutional crises brought about thanks due in no small part to the twisted machinations of this disastrous Barack Hussein Obama regime. We are at a precarious place in our history. And the worst thing about it, folks, is that it shows no signs of improving at any time within the foreseeable future. We are just sitting there spinning our wheels, going nowhere. And the fact that Donald J. Trump wants to double down on his attacks on Ted Cruz instead of focusing his firepower on Hillary Clinton fully demonstrates that all of this push for a tyranny of false unity is excrement. Now, I know that we've mentioned that on previous episodes, and I know that it seems as though we are repeating that far too much. But it does bear repeating, because it speaks exactly to the condition and the state of affairs that our once thriving and flourishing representative republic faces right now. We have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to be moving back to a modicum of sanity. That means we have to go back to those principles that are time-honored principles, the principles that were with us since the foundation of this great nation of ours. That's why we have so oft-times stated, both Jeremy and yours truly, as well as our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, have said that the key has been with us since the very beginning of this country, since the ratification of the key. And that key of which I speak is none other than the United States Constitution. Again, folks, this is why it is so important to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of not only our Constitution, but also your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Because unless and until you are willing to do so, the nefarious forces of tyranny, despotism, and oppression are going to continue to get a foothold in the land of the free and the home of the brave. What we must do in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty is band together, standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity, and let all enemies of the Constitution know that no, they cannot fundamentally transform this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. They are not endowed with the authority to do so. We didn't give them the authority to do so. Sure. They'll sit there and try and say that Donald J. Trump managed to amass the majority of the Republican votes. But that just is not the case when you actually look at the way that the rules were mapped out. And that is also part of the intellectually disingenuous filth that they are foisting down our throats. The other thing that makes Donald Trump so dangerous is the fact that he does what so many politicians have done in the past. Recall that all throughout the primary process, the Lion Branch Trumpidians told us that one of the reasons that they had unwavering support for the mafioso, quaff-waffler himself was that he told the truth. That he was somehow a political outsider that didn't play the games of politics like the detente wing of the gutless opposition party or GOP. But the fact of the matter is, he always custom tailors his message to whatever particular audience that he's speaking before. But then, when he goes in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism to the salivating mainstream media, he says that everything that he said throughout the campaign and throughout the election season are mere suggestions, meaning that they are open to change. And also providing him with a rather intellectually disingenuous out so that he doesn't have to abide by the numerous and vociferous promises he made while on the campaign trail. Again, folks, this is what we have been trying to warn about here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, going back some 10.5 months to 11 months now. Donald Trump is not who he claims to be. He's never once, in the vast majority of his 70 years spent on God's green earth, ever truly espoused conservative values. What in the hell makes you think he's going to do so now? And that brings me back to something that a dear friend of mine said, who is supporting the quaff waffle out of fear of what Hillary Clinton could unleash upon our once thriving and flourishing representative Republican form of government, if she were ever to secure the reins of power, was that you can't go by what Trump said 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 or 30 years ago, because business is so much different than politics, and therefore you just have to go by the promises that he makes now. All right, well, let's just accept the premise of her argument, the terms and conditions of her argument for argument's sake. When we look at what Trump has said throughout the campaign process, we see that he has not once stayed consistent. First, he said that we should have a temporary moratorium on Islamic immigration into the United States. Then he walked it back, saying it was just going to be a few. Then he upped it again, and then we don't really know where he's going to stand. Look at the way that he's just been willy-nilly with respect to his tax plan. He's been willing to abandon that at the drop of a hat, or is that at the drop of a toupee? I'm not going to split hairs here over that, folks, but what we are facing here is the undaunting truth, the unrelenting reality that he does not mean what he says, that he does not have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and he certainly has no respect for our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. That speaks volumes about just how dangerous he is. Because if you stop and think about it, what is it that Hillary does that really works against our nation? She embraces big government. And if you go back to the speech that Donald Trump gave on the last night of the convention, he sat there and said that he was going to fix everything, that he and he alone was what was going to make America great. And if you stop then and compare that to some of the messages that have been resounding from the stump-thumping speeches at the DNC convention in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, you'll hear that they say, you're an idiot if you say America ceased being great. Remember, folks, that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have stated that platitude was dangerous, that the United States of America has never ceased being great, that it's just fluff. It's fluff to have fear-mongering put forward before the base of the gutless opposition party to convince them that Donald J. Trump will somehow be a great messianic figure, a savior, for not only their quality of life, standard of living, but also for the nation itself, to get us back to being quote-unquote great. But first of all, America hasn't stopped being great. He has given ammunition to the frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialists. It allowed them to play lip service to saying that they believe that the United States of America is the greatest nation on earth, when we know nothing could be further from the truth. They have always been diametrically opposed to the things that we hold near and dear in this country. But Trump and his vulgar style of delivery have given them everything that they've ever wanted. Because as we have warned before, he fulfills and satisfies all of the stereotypical two-dimensional caricatures that the left attempts to pigeonhole the right with in this country. And they have been able to do that over and over again ad nauseum with the help of their allies, the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. So we have to be able to overcome this. We have to sit back and look at this in a logical and an objective fashion to understand exactly where it is that things went awry. Well, for starters, this 2016 presidential election cycle started with the primary process of having 17 Republican contenders. 17 Republican contenders. And of those, we know that Lindsey Grahamnesty, that El Jefe Jeb Bush, that Carly Fiorina, and Ted Cruz have all refused to go out and officially endorse the mafioso quafioso. Yet, if we recall, it was only Ted Cruz that was invited to speak on the convention floor there in Cleveland, Ohio, on the second-to-last evening. I may have said it was last evening earlier in the program. I meant to say second-to-last evening. But during his speech, and he didn't want to accept, but he did, to push a message of do not stay home, and to stay true to your conscience, to vote your conscience. Whether that meant you voted for Donald Trump or not, that is a quintessentially American characteristic and value, and yet he is the only one that is being attacked for that. That is so intellectually disingenuous. It goes against everything that we hold near and dear in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And I am sick and tired of seeing this just horrific double standard being foisted upon us against our will. It must come to an end. And the sooner, the better. What we have to sit down and realize is that what we are truly facing in America right now is an attempt to be deceitful. The gutless opposition party is not acting in the best interests of their base. They're not trying to go forward with our traditional values. So it all comes down to this attempt to bamboozle us, to make us think that we have to buy into that erroneous notion of voting for the lesser of two evils, or as I like to refer to it, as the voting for the lesser of two evils. It's almost as though you're being called up to be a contestant in a game show, and the whole purpose of the show is to determine whether you'd rather be shot and killed through the right eye or shot and killed through the left eye. The fact of the matter remains that it doesn't matter which eye you get shot through, you're going to die. That's the entire purpose here. It is poison. It will kill you either way. It just may directly impact a different part of the body. That's the way you have to think about this. It's because that erroneous doctrine has led us down to a path of just getting worse and worse candidates in a progressive fashion in election cycle after successive election cycle. And we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, are about empowering you, the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, so that you can have a direct say. That's the problem. We've gotten away from what matters. We've gotten away from the true essence of our great constitutionally endowed representative Republican form of government. And it's not going to be easy to take it back. But we must take it back. We don't have a choice in the matter. The United States of America is the last best hope for freedom. It is the last bastion of freedom and of liberty on God's green earth. Therefore, we should not just so easily allow that gift of the greatest birthright of any people on the face of this planet, that birthright being our shared United States Constitution, just fall into oblivion. And that means that we must protect it from anyone who would attempt to abridge it, anyone who would attempt to encroach upon the clear and concise language contained within its four corners, irrespective of whether they have an R or a D after their name. I don't know why this is such a difficult concept for many to understand. They sit there and think that somehow Hillary Rotten Clinton is going to be worse than Donald Julius Caesar Trumpolini. No, they are the titular heads, or the opposite faces, of the same wicked, blood-stained coin. And it's high past time that we in the United States of America, both as a nation and as a people, come to the realization that any force that works in a nefarious fashion to try and strip and deprive us and abridge us of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, those rights that our founding fathers, particularly George Mason, had concluded were endowed to us by our Creator, the God of nature, cannot be trusted with the reins of political power. So, again, the danger of factionalization is unfurling before our eyes. It's laying there bare, baring its teeth at us, and threatening to destroy the societal fabric of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. Again, there is no way around this. There is no way to sweep this under the rug, while of course the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are going to attempt to do this, as they have been for generation upon generation. We must say once and for all, enough is enough. This country doesn't belong to them. This country is ours. It always has been, it was always intended to be, and we need to get back to that original intent. That is why my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have begun the movement to develop and establish the constitutional compositionist movement. We go back to the true original document, the clear and concise language that's contained within its four corners. We go back, in other words, to the original composition of the greatest social compact or contract ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above. And while that may sound abstract, or maybe even a bit naive on our part, nothing could be further from the truth, because when you stop and think about it in an objective fashion, you begin to realize that is the central thread. That is the core of our representative Republican form of government. And that is the way that we will maintain our freedom, our security, and our standard of living and way of life. Remember that the Constitution is more than merely being the supreme law of the land. I know that we have oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, what is known in the common vernacular as the Supremacy Clause, the Constitution itself composes the supreme law of the land, but it also defines what our duties and obligations and above all responsibilities are in our capacity as popular sovereigns, whether we are natural-born citizens or naturalized citizens. It goes back to that old adage that I've brought up time and again before, that the sum is greater, or rather that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts with respect to our representative republic. The United States of America stands for the natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundation of the Constitution and our republic. Those things are greater than any one of us in our individual capacity. They will be greater than our progeny, And that is why we must safeguard it. Because surely history will judge us most harshly if we drop the ball on this, America. Surely history will judge us most harshly as the generation that refused to stand up to two prospective tyrants who are vying for the highest office in the land, seeking to clutch their claws into the reins of political power in the United States of America. What they want is to abridge all that we hold near and dear in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And I cannot emphasize enough just how important it is that we do not allow any charlatan, fraud, huckster, con artist, snake oil salesman, or carnival barker to take that away from us. Because when you stop and think about it, without those things, as my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, has so oft times reiterated, without our rights we are left with nothing. That means that the government can dictate what we can do, how we live our lives, whether we live or die. Now, do you really want to entrust them with that when they can't even run the United States Postal Service efficiently? I, for one, do not want to allow that to happen, and I have a feeling that the vast majority of our cherished listening passengers and audience members don't want to have that happen either. We must stand together shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity and send this resounding message to those potentates, those wannabe potentates, that we will not allow them to fundamentally alter the true national heritage, character, spirit, and above all, identity of these United States of America. It really is that simple. It really is that black and white, and we must stand for it. Because, honestly, Donald J. Trump's not going to. We already know that the Democrats loathe and despise everything that the United States Constitution stands for, everything that our true popular sovereigns and citizens stand for in the utmost contempt. Why should we then support a waffling candidate like Donald J. Trump? Because he doesn't support the things we do. He doesn't believe in what we do. He won't stand up for our rights. In fact, in his capacity as a private citizen, what he went out and did was try to abuse the system, to curtail and abridge the rights of, independent American citizens, to strip and deprive them of their fundamental and inalienable God-given right to keep and hold property through the abuse of eminent domain. And yes, Kello tried to make that possible, tried to make it to where you could use it for private development. But remember that the 9th Amendment to the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, says that we cannot interpret the Constitution. We cannot use it in such a way as to abridge or encroach upon the fundamental and inalienable rights of the citizens. One right cannot be more superior or greater in value and extent than any other right. They are all considered to be of equal value. That is the resounding lesson that we need to take home from what our founding fathers handed down to us some 235 years ago. And unless and until we return to that and embrace that holistically under the totality of the circumstances, we are going to continue to face this unraveling of our societal fabric. And that is something we just cannot afford to do. We cannot afford to allow that to happen because our nation is far too important. The things that we value and hold near and dear are far too important to allow to just fall by the wayside and to fall into oblivion in a knee-jerk reaction for a faltering, wavering sense of security. Because if you remember the prophetic words of Benjamin Franklin, when he said that those who give up or surrender essential liberties for a fleeting sense of security deserve neither liberty nor security and shall surely have neither, that is the condition that we find ourselves in now. That is the untenable situation that we, this once thriving and flourishing representative republic, find ourselves in today. And it's unacceptable. It is unsustainable. It cannot be allowed to continue, because if we do, we lose everything. We stand to lose everything. And I'm not willing to let that happen, just as I am sure you are not either. Now, folks, one of the laughable things that has happened with respect to the DNC being held there in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is the fact that Debbie Wawa Show, or Debbie Wasserman Schultz, was forced to give up her DNC chair position. And the reason she was forced to do that was because of the email hacking scandal. Now, of course, that too is a double standard. It shows exactly why we have always been opposed to the Democrats. Because Hillary Rotten Clinton is not held accountable for her email scandal, which is far more deleterious to national security and to the health, safety, and well-being of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. But it reflects something deeper. It reflects that there is this strain that is shared not only by Hillary Rotten Clinton and Donald Julius Caesar, but also between the detente members of both parties. That they think they are above the law. Remember that when Hillary Clinton was let go by Comey of the FBI, basically saying that they had the evidence but they weren't going to pursue it, that marked a watershed moment in American history. And the reason I say that that marked a watershed moment in American history was because it marked a true official step, an admission on the part of those within the rank and file of the federal government that the United States of America was no longer a nation of laws, not of men, but had become one in which we give certain individuals due to their rank or status or just who they are, carte blanche to have a get-out-of-jail-free card. That's not a good position for the United States of America to be in, because it goes against everything that we hold near and dear. It goes against the foundational image that our founding fathers had for this nation, dating back to its inception over 235 years ago. While that may seem so minor in the grand scheme of things, it is still of the utmost importance, because those tenets, which are part of the natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundation of our country, still hold meaning. They still hold a very significant meaning, and the fact that we've gone away from them just speaks volumes about the state of decay that currently grips the hearts, souls, and minds of America and the arena of American politics. It's a dangerous position. It's one that we had hoped that we would never find ourselves in. But because we have bought into this narrative of accepting the lesser of two evils, particularly in these last two consecutive presidential election cycles, we have allowed ourselves to go down this untenable and unacceptable as well as unsustainable path. Why? Why is it that we allow these things to continue unabated, unfettered, unchallenged? It is the duty, obligation, and above all, the responsibility of we the people, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, to stand up in solidarity and unity, to stand together, shoulder to shoulder, to challenge this. Because when you really look at the totality of the circumstances, you begin to realize just how corrupt and out of touch this really is with respect to how our system of polity was designed to work. Our legal system, pursuant to the 14th Amendment and, of course, to the clear and concise language contained all throughout the four corners of our shared United States Constitution, is to apply equally. I know that we have oft-times reiterated this on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence the Wright Flyer, but it's so substantive and important that it bears repeating again here. We simply cannot allow the United States to go down the path that it is currently headed, because down that path lies the trail to ruination, and we can ill afford that. We truly cannot afford to allow our nation to go down that path right here, right now, as I speak into this microphone. But the whole notion of what Trump has been saying all throughout this election cycle has just been destructive. He has ties to totalitarian dictators. In fact, he has oftentimes sung the praises of them. Think back that he sung the praises of the communist Chinese in putting down the rising or uprising there at Tiananmen Square back in 1989. He again sung the praises of Kim Jong-il, the late Kim Jong-il. It's now Kim Jong-un that is there. But he said that he did a great job, that he clearly was assuming the reins of power in a land that would be hostile to him. That was not an easy path for that young dictator to walk. Why are we singing the praises of totalitarian dictators? Unless, of course, he himself has that authoritarian strain. Now, I've heard many of the Lion Branch Trumpidians sit there and say that that's okay, that business people, by the nature of the way business is conducted in these United States, requires that there be an authoritarian strain. Maybe so, but again, recall that the United States of America is not a business. Our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights are non-negotiable. Yet Trump has gone in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism to the salivating mainstream media ad nauseum and repetitively and said that everything is negotiable. Everything can be placed on the bargaining table. And then, if you recall, during the whole Second Amendment fight, Dr. Ben I'm a Victim Carson, famed rocket surgeon, went on MSNBC and said he didn't see a need for the Second Amendment. That's the second time that little fraud has come out and said that. And he said that it should be placed on the bargaining table. Once again, clearly demonstrating that he does not have a firm grasp of the Constitution or the way that the natural law works. That he is once again betraying the principles of the United States of America. Now, of course, I had a friend who is a Trumpist who sat there and said, I don't care even if he was there speaking in a representative capacity on the part of the Trump campaign. Unless I hear it from Trump, it doesn't count. Now, what's ironic about that is she is also the same one that sat there and said that you can't take into account what Trump said 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 30 years ago. You just have to go by the promises he's made now. Folks, the man has a proven track record in his business dealings as being a con artist, a confidence man. He gains the confidence of his marks, and then he leaves them out high and dry while reaping the profits while they suffer complete and total annihilation and collapse. Does that sound like something that we want to allow near the reins of political power in the United States of America? Is that who we want to be, the leader of the free world? A man who has a penchant of quashing freedom? A man who has no affinity for our Constitution? Because if you recall back in 2012, he said that he found no inherent or intrinsic value in reading the Constitution from cover to cover, and therefore he's never once done it. Never once. Yet, if he is, by some fluke or cruel twist of fate, elected into the highest office in the land, he's going to raise his right hand and swear an oath of obligation to uphold and defend the United States Constitution against all enemies, whether they be foreign or domestic. Again, you cannot trust the words of what he would say there, because he's already shown that he does not find value in the Constitution. And anything he says now is just playing lip service to it, because as he has so oft times and frequently demonstrated throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle, he's consistently inconsistent. Because he doesn't believe it. The man is a narcissist with no core values. The man does not have a true lofty philosophy or belief in the American people. And if you say that he loves the United States of America, he sure has a funny way of showing it. Because you can't love America if you don't love the Constitution. Let me repeat that. You cannot love the United States Constitution unless you love what it stands for and it represents, and that is codified within the clear and concise language within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. Folks, there really is no way around that. It really is that cut and dry. It really is that black and white. It is non-negotiable, non-delegable, and should never be placed on the bargaining table. Yet here we are, with the official nominee of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, being one who believes that everything is negotiable, including our fundamental and inalienable rights which were endowed to us by our Creator, the God of nature himself. Why have we allowed ourselves to have a disingenuous candidate yet once again? In fact, the most left-leaning disingenuous candidate in all living memory. It's despicable. It's heart-wrenching. It tears at the heart and soul of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people of the United States of America. Again, I have no words of solace or comfort to provide you with respect to this path of destruction that we're headed down. We have allowed ourselves once again to be bamboozled by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. We've allowed the thugs to once again just run rampant and wild on the convention floor there in Cleveland, Ohio, and it has placed us in this untenable and unsustainable situation that we find ourselves currently as I sit here speaking into this microphone, conveying this message unto you. But we can still overcome it. As long as there is breath in our lungs, we can overcome any of these hurdles, obstacles, and adversities placed in our path. We have to overcome them because there is no option. There is no choice. We either stand up for our country or we allow these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists who are hell-bent on the utter annihilation of the United States of America, both as a nation and as a people, to have their way. And if they have their way, it works against all that we hold near and dear. It goes against the very foundational principles, the natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundation of both our Constitution and our representative Republican form of government. It really is that cut and dry. And unless and until we are willing to realize that and are willing to take whatever steps are necessary, the prerequisite steps to place this nation back onto the path to prosperity, not making it great again because it never ceased being great, but back onto the path to prosperity, we are going to continue to see these untenable situations be continued, unabated, and to accelerate at an exponential rate. I, for one, do not want to see the United States of America fall down this path, to be subjected to the terrors that will exist under the presidency of either Donald J. Trump or Hillary Rotten Clinton. And what makes that all the more worse is the fact that we had a true, dedicated constitutional compositionist in Texas Senator Ted Cruz vying for that office, and the media was allowed to obliterate him, and the Lion Branch Trumpidians truly demonstrated their lack of common sense and understanding by suffering from acute ostrich syndrome. That is, they've shoved their heads up their posterior instead of in the ground. And what good is that going to accomplish us? They sit there and they continue to insult us and our candidate. They continue to try and say that he's an establishment type, when in fact, when you look at his record, nothing could be further from the truth. And they try and blame the inevitable defeat that will be headed down the pikeway here on us. They try to lay that at our feet, and I am, for one, sick and tired of it. Because it is so intellectually disingenuous, because it does not get to the root problems that face this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. Again, the duty and obligation, as well as the responsibility, perhaps even most importantly as the responsibility of we the people in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, is to proactively maintain and safeguard our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. That is what our founding fathers expected us to do, and I'm going to once again point to an example that comes from the prophetic words of founding father Benjamin Franklin. When the Constitutional Convention came to its conclusion, a young woman ran up to Mr. Franklin and proclaimed, Mr. Franklin, what is it that you have given us? in true form to the way the man is and to everything that he stood for and believed, he turned to that young woman and he said, "Young lady, we have given you a republic, if you can keep it." You know what that "if you can keep it" means? I know that we've repeated it on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, but it ties in directly and is directly on point to the point that I'm trying to make here. It meant that we are expected to proactively maintain and safeguard our republic, as well as our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, to ensure that it's handed down to our posterity. It's meant to last for the successive generations. It does not mean that we give up on it. It does not mean that we kowtow to wannabe potentates, thugs, dictators, despots, and tyrants. Because the moment that we do that is the moment that we give up on everything that this nation has ever stood for or represented. And we simply cannot allow that to come to fruition. We cannot allow that to be the way of our nation. Our nation is greater than the sum of the whole of its parts. That is everything that we stand for. And we just cannot afford to give up on that right now, or ever. Because it is so significant, because it is so substantial, because it is what forms the bedrock foundation of who we are both as a nation and as a people. It is that important. And that is why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, are so dedicated to preserving it and empowering you. You know, I want to speak to something that Mark Cuban said. We here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have a lot of disagreements with the Dallas Mavericks owner, but, you know, because he said that he would never vote for that Ted Cruz fellow, but he's also not going to vote for Donald Trump. And he speaks that the reason that he doesn't want to support his alleged fellow billionaire is because he had an opportunity to do something. He had the opportunity to change things, but he doesn't want to do the work. He's lazy. It's so amazing that we hear that and see that. Because we also know that Paul Manafort, the chief flatulence master himself, had said that he wanted to delegate most of the duties and authorities of the office of President of the United States to whomever he had selected as his vice presidential candidate. And as we all know, that is the squish Pence. Mike Pence, the Indiana governor. But I want to bring up Cuban's words for himself. I want to play the soundbite so that you can hear it from the man's words himself. And then we'll delve a little more deeply into the significance of what it was that he was actually saying. So I'm going to cue that up right about now.
Please welcome Mark Cuban. Good to see you. All right. You have already expressed some of your opinions about Donald Trump here tonight, but I want to point something out to you, my friend. In July of 2015, you said, quote, "Trump is probably the best thing to happen to politics in a long time. I don't care what his actual positions are." But last night on Twitter, you officially joined the Never Trump Club. What changed for you? What changed for you? Why was he the best thing that happened to politics, and now he's the never?
Well, at the beginning, he was a business person, and I wanted to see a change from the traditional politician. But then he went and opened his mouth. You know? I mean, he had a really good chance to be different and really have a chance to change things, but he doesn't do the work. He's lazy.
Now, folks, what I want to point out there is he went into this under the same line of thought that so many have, that Trump is great because he's a businessman, and that we want to see a shift away from traditional politicians. Again, that voices the type of disenfranchisement that has been running rampant within the rank and file of the base of the gutless opposition party, or GOP. But it goes to show that Donald Trump is not a man who really loves what America stands for or represents. And while I may wholeheartedly disagree with Mark Cuban on his stance with respect to Texas Senator Ted Cruz, I think he is right in his assessment of the mafioso coafioso. Donald Trump does not represent the values of the American people. He never has. He never truly will. He cannot relate to us, even though his spin doctors have done a masterful job of convincing the disillusioned conservatives that he can. And so now, as we are pulling up for this tyranny of a false unity, what they always call for, irrespective of what the political tea leaves might actually say, they disregard that. They have fallen into the trap of the Pied Piper of disillusioned conservatives. And if there's one thing that my first officer, Jeremy Grafington, and I, hell, even our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, have reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, it's that we should not just base our vote on what other people try and tell us. Yes, we can look into what they're saying and form that as a basis of research for doing the legwork to determine what is required. But remember that the only litmus test that matters, indeed the only litmus test that is applicable in determining whether or not a candidate is qualified to hold the reins of political power, or to wield the reins of political power in this republic of ours, is the Constitution itself. And yes, what Mark Cuban mentioned there, the fact that Trump is unwilling to do the work, that he is at his base just lazy, goes directly into something that we as a nation have started to suffer. In this fast-paced modern society, we don't seem to take the time to delve into the candidates. We don't seem to research the issues well enough. We don't seem to take the time that's necessary, even though there is a girth, a substantial girth of research and information there that was never at our disposal before. We are truly fortunate to live in this time of the information revolution, and that is something that we should use to empower us. In fact, that's the way that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, are able to come to you, but it's also how we conduct our research. We delve into it, we do show prep, we prepare everything. Well, that's what you need to do with your candidates. That's what you need to do. You need to soul search right now and make the determination for what your conscience tells you. And what's so amazing about that is that's the same message that Ted Cruz delivered when he gave that speech there on the convention floor in Cleveland, Ohio last week and received a just torrent of boos. Yet he was one of the few Republican candidates who had the conviction to stand up there and face that kind of tidal wave. Now, there are many within the rank and file of the supposed conservative punditry and commensurate, people like that charlatan Laura Ingraham or Lush Bimbo or Michael Wiener Savage and others, who sat there and said that Cruz had committed political suicide. Nothing could be further from the truth. When you stop and think about it, nothing literally could be further from the truth. Because what he was doing there was standing up for American values, for our conservative principles. And yes, our conservative principles are shared among us. We may share them to a different degree. We may disagree with the method by which we believe that they can best be achieved, but ultimately those convictions, those values, and those principles are shared. They are a common thread. They are a uniting thread within the right in America. Except that with Donald J. Trump, that has been blown to smithereens. He doesn't support any of that. He doesn't walk the line of that. Instead, he has just ratcheted up the tension and the emotional pressure to such a degree that we are at each other's throats attempting to rip out each other's jugulars. We can ill afford that right now. But again, unity must be reached over the only thing that truly unifies us both as a nation and as a people. And as we have mentioned on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, there is only one thing that we are called upon both as a nation and as a people to swear allegiance to, and that is none other than our shared United States Constitution. That is just one of those undeniable facts of reality, one of those central tenets of our once thriving and flourishing representative republic. And so therefore it falls squarely on our shoulders. The onus is on us, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, to unite around the Constitution, not around a cult of personality, not around what rinse and repeatist, the diabolical chairman of the RNC, tells us to do. it falls on us to be proactive in the maintenance and safeguarding of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. And therefore, we must not walk away from it. We must not turn our back on it. We must not abandon it. That's why we say it is so disheartening to see people abandon their principles. Because if you do that, you are being dishonest to yourself. You are allowing extemporaneous and external forces and pressures to cloud your thought, to cloud your judgment, to allow you to become malleable like putty in the hands of a charlatan, a huckster, a con artist, a carnival barker, and a snake oil salesman. And let's be fully honest with each other, folks. Donald J. Trump fits all of those categories, and Donald J. Trump has shown a penchant throughout the vast majority of his 70 years spent on Earth of only looking out for the best interests of Donald J. Trump. He's about self-aggrandizement. He is about the consolidation of power in an illicit fashion into his hands at the great expense of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. This is a resounding message that that just sounds off in the hearts, souls, and minds of the American people if we were in touch with our constitutional duties, obligations, and above all, responsibility. But due to the meticulous and incessant efforts of the frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialists, we have been steadily, incrementally pushed away from that. We have been pushed down an untenable and unacceptable path that has caused us to abandon the things that matter the most to us. And we can't afford to allow that to happen. We can ill afford to allow that to happen. But I, for one, am not willing to give up hope and faith on the American people, because I know that deep down in our heart of hearts we realize what is necessary. We know the necessary and proper steps to be taken to place this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours back onto the path to prosperity. But it is going to require the diligent efforts. And we cannot just entrust the reins of political power to one who is an inept, incompetent, lazy freak who is a vulgarian. I hate to be crass, but that is literally the problem that we are facing, both as a party and as a nation and as a people. So we must become proactive, and we must reject these attempts to besmirch decent individuals. One of the chief complaints that I have with respect to the gutless opposition party is that for so long it has been the party of morality. It has been the party that is looking to retain the virtuous character of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And that is why they have been unwavering on refusing to accept malignant and malicious behavior in the past. It's why they have been so willing to throw those who have committed unspeakable atrocities of moral turpitude, like Fred Foley, under the bus. Because it does not represent the values of the party. It does not represent everything that we come together for to share our like-minded ideas about. That may seem a foreign thing now, as we are in the grips of this 2016 presidential election cycle. An election cycle in which morality has been cast by the wayside. And of course, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are just applauding at this. They're jumping up and down and frothing at the mouth at double pace or double time because they see this as an opportunity to say, see, the Republican Party no longer stands for all of that crap they claimed to in previous years. And of course, they have themselves facilitated this by claiming that the 2016 presidential election cycle is the election cycle in which we cast conventional wisdom by the wayside. Now, what exactly does that mean? What does that, say with respect to the current state of affairs in our republic? It goes to show that we have fallen so far astray from the constitutional originalist message that we are lost. It's as though we have gone out on some sort of an excursion and we have lost our way and we refuse to look at the map, the road map that will guide us back to liberty, to limited government, to the type of freedom and virtuosity that we have always loved and, exuded as a nation and a people. And of course, that roadmap of which I speak is none other than our shared United States Constitution. That is the bedrock of everything that matters in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And unless and until we get back to standing up for those things and representing those things, we are going to continue to see this downward spiral, this moral decay, grip the hearts and minds of the American citizen. And that's heartbreaking. If you stop and think about it and look at it in an objective fashion within the totality of the circumstances, that should be heartbreaking to every decent, hard-working, red-blooded American citizen. Because it means that we have allowed these nefarious forces that are hell-bent on our utter annihilation to get a grip upon the pulse, the United States of America, and they are squeezing, threatening to push the United States of America against its will into cardiac arrest. We can't afford that. We must resist them with every fiber in our being. Otherwise, we are just going to let the greatest gift and birthright and inheritance of any people on the face of the planet be in vain. Let it just fall into oblivion. Can we afford that? Can we allow ourselves to be redefined by those forces who never once had our best interests at heart? I think the answer to that rhetorical question is open and obvious. We cannot allow these frauds, these charlatans, these fakes to redefine who we are, because we will not bow down to it, we will not capitulate to it, we will never accept it. That is the truth of the matter. That is the great weight of the evidence. That is what we must do, both as a nation and as a people. Back on July 26th, Daniel Horowitz said that what true conservatives are facing right now is a crisis of conscience. And yes, he was speaking directly in reference to that great speech that Ted Cruz gave on the convention floor there in Cleveland, Ohio. The most Republican speech of that entire convention. And the crisis of conscience that we face right now is that we have put up a charlatan, a man who is no conservative, as the nominee for the gutless opposition party. Trump has stated, as I mentioned earlier in today's program, and indeed on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that it's the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party. He's also said that he doesn't want unity within the rank and file of the GOP base, and that he would rather reach out and attempt to woo over disenfranchised socialist voters for Vermont Senator Whiteface Boyd V. Sanders, the flying saucer, who loves to drink sauce as long as someone else is paying for it. I'm lost. Why do we want to bring in socialists? Why do we want to bring in those people who do not share any of our values? You see, that's one of the major problems and points of contention that Jeremy Nelson and I have with respect to the mafioso quafioso. Trump does not represent conservatism. And that, again, the only things that matter are the Constitution. Because that is, if you look at all of the problems that we're facing in America, they can be directly traced back to distancing ourselves and divorcing ourselves from the supreme law of the land. And again, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, the Supremacy Clause, the Constitution itself constitutes that supreme law of the land. But Trump doesn't care. Trump is going to go out and say that he alone, in narcissistic fashion, can be the coiffure, the savior, the coiffy savior of the United States of America. Folks, our founding fathers warned against this. That is trying to create a king, an emperor within a representative republic. In many respects, if you look back to the fall of the Roman Republic and the rise of Julius Caesar, that is where we are now. Caesar has crossed the Rubicon, and the future of the United States of America hangs in the balance. Yes, Hillary Clinton is a dire threat. We have said that. We say that we know who she is. We know how to combat her. But Donald J. Trump is equally, if not more, of a threat than Hillary. And the reason we say that is he lies. He lies about who he is. He is the one that is more solidly embracing the message of the Fabian Socialists, their original iconography of that of a wolf in sheep's clothing. He's doing that to penetrate the upper echelons of the gutless opposition party, to then try and dupe the disillusioned conservatives into thinking that he will do everything that he says. And of course, they sit there and they try and say that we can't find a perfect candidate. But that's just blowing smoke. That is a red herring. That is an attempt to put out a distraction. It's not that we're looking for a perfect candidate. We're not even putting our support behind an individual. Our support, our loyalty is to that of the Constitution. That is what our founding fathers called upon us to be loyal to. That is what we must show our loyalty to. And if we waver from that, we are doing a great disservice not only to our ancestors, but to those up-and-coming generations, and indeed those generations which have yet to be born. We can ill afford to allow that to happen. And again, this crisis of conscience that's happening right now is we can either buy into the lies of the mafioso quafioso and once again hold our noses and vote for the lesser of two weasels, or we can do the principled thing and reject them both, because there needs to be a message and a lesson learned for those who are the elitists within the rank and file of the gutless opposition party, or GOP. They need to learn that they cannot do this without us. And in fact, that's one of the refrains that I've heard from the Lion Branch Trumpidians that is more annoying than almost anything else they say. And believe me, folks, what they say, and the vast majority of what they say, in fact, is annoying, is that they don't need conservatives to win. Yeah, you know who else said that? Mitt Romney. His followers said that. Then, when they lost, of course, they chose their favorite scapegoats to lay this blame on, the true, dyed-in-the-wool constitutional conservatives. You know, John McCain said it too. How well did that work out for him? Bob Dole before him. And Gerald Ford before even him. There is a common denominator, a common string, or thread, that stitches those like-minded movements together. And that is this. They take for granted conservatives. And Trump said that he didn't have to reach out to Cruz voters because he knew they had nowhere else to turn. Well, that is a load of bovine excrement. We don't have to accept him. And we are certainly not going to. Part of the whole message of what the hashtag Never Trump movement stood for was never means never. Now, I know that that's difficult for some to comprehend. I'm a little disappointed in Mark Levin, although I am grateful that he is still out there showing the inconsistencies of the mafioso quafioso. But when he says that he's probably going to vote for him, no, Mark, when you pledge Never Trump, you should stay loyal to that. Because our words, our deeds, and our actions are going to be how the annals and sands of time and history judge us. We have an opportunity here to put our foot down, or to put our feet down, rather, and to say enough is enough. We have the ability to come together, standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity, to send that unresounding, unmistakable, unquestioning message that no, we will not tolerate this sort of chicanery any longer. Stop doing this to us and go back to the things that matter. Go back to the natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundations of this beloved representative republic of ours. Because unless and until we do that, we are going to continue to see this nation slip ever further into moral blight, societal decay, and to divisive division. And let's face it, folks, it's not just the frothing-at-the-mouth, Fabian socialist-controlled Democrat Party that has foisted this upon us. It's not just the utopian socialists that want us to bow down at the altar of the state and of centralized big government. It's also the detente wing of the gutless opposition party. They are the ones that refused to coalesce behind Texas Senator Ted Cruz. They are the ones that decided that they would throw their lot in behind the mafioso quafioso. They are the ones that decided to tell us that our vote doesn't matter. And they are the ones through who rinse and repeat goes on to the media circuits and tries to say that it's okay for the Democrat delegates to vote their conscience. But he did everything in his power to ensure that the Republican delegates could not be unbound from the mafioso quafioso. That is chicanery. That has no place in a freedom-loving society like that of the United States of America. And folks, we have been warning about this and the dangers of this for so long now, yet the Lion Branch Trumpidians chose to continue to suffer from their acute ostrich syndrome of shoving their heads up their posterior so that they don't have to listen to reality. Because it's so unfortunate for them, and in fact I pity them for this, they have projected their own self-worth and value onto their candidate. It's as though they don't know who they are. It's as though they don't know how to be who they are without having someone tell them what to do. And that is not the way that the American conscience has ever worked. And that is why Ted Cruz stood on that podium in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media there on that convention floor last week in Cleveland, Ohio, and said, vote your conscience. But now that's some bad thing. That's some horrible thing. That's something we shouldn't accept. That shows that he is just caring about himself, that he's an opportunistic little weasel aiming for 2020. Grow up. Grow the F up. That is not how any of this works. But that's what they want you to believe. Because they are the detente wing of the gutless opposition party. And it shows that all the things that the Lion Branch Trumpidians have said all throughout this primary process and now leading up to the general election cycle that is slated for this November were based not on a house of cards, but on a Waffle House. That like their fearless leader, they are sitting there saying whatever they can to genuflect to fit his positions and accept it because he can do no wrong because they are so invested with it. The only thing that any of us, in our capacity as the true ultimate leaders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, should project ourselves onto and accept as the quintessential part of what it means to be an American citizen, is that of our shared United States Constitution. I know, that seems so simple. It seems as though it's out of touch with the way modern society is, but no, it's not. Because once again, we know for a fact, we know for an absolute certainty that the Constitution and our representative Republican form of government are based on the natural law tenets which by their very nature are timeless. In other words, they're just as applicable today as they were 235 years ago at the inception of the United States, as they will be, God willing, 235 years from this point today, as I sit here and speak into this microphone. That is the truth, and that is the message that should unify us, because that is what our founding fathers expected to unify us, and it goes back to the warning that George Washington made in his farewell address, decrying factionalization and how that would pit American citizen against American citizen, thereby causing us to lose sight of the greater meaning of things. And the greater meaning of things in the United States of America is codified within the clear and concise language contained inside the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. That's why we always go back to the Constitution, because it is the most important aspect of our national character, heritage, spirit, but above all, identity. And yes, the revisionist historians and the other cultural Marxists that have infested our institutions of education from coast to coast and border to border have worked meticulously for the past century and a half of incrementally pushing us away from that self-evident truth of our Constitution and of that being the only thing that truly unifies us both as a nation and a people, to where we have become lost. This is what brings about that crisis of conscience that Daniel Horowitz mentioned. And we have to accept that that is a true, significant, meaningful problem. And folks, when you foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, you have accepted the key that will allow you to unlock the chains and shackles that have been foisted upon you by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who seek nothing more and nothing less than your complete and utter annihilation. That's, again, why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, will never turn our back on the principles and message that we convey to you every time we take off over the friendly airwaves. We are dedicated to you, we do this for you, we seek to empower you, and that is something that will never change. Now, folks, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Ladies and gentlemen, you can be assured that she will not turn her back on you. She's just there to pour alcohol for you. As always, folks, I'm your Captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for tuning in to the Wright Flyer. I invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you may have, either here at our YouTube page, our Google Plus page, or our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle at RadioAviationEX. One more time, folks, that's at RadioAviationEX. And there you will find our departure board that lists both my First Officer, Jeremy Grapington's personal Twitter account, as well as mine, our Blogspot page that has audio blogs, and also the Cafe Press account. At the Cafe Press account, you can find all sorts of trinkets and goodies with either our first-class passenger logo on it or our traditional Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer logo on it. We have all sorts of shirts, apparel, clothing, hats, drinking glasses, shot glasses, clocks, watches, tote bags, flip-flops, you name it. You'll find something there at reasonable prices that fits your everyday needs. Folks, go ahead and give that a look and see if you find something that really fits you, and go ahead and give us a little bit of support and support yourself in admitting that what we are all trying to do here is to find an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment. As always, folks, thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. We'll see you next time. Do take care.